There is something fundamentally wrong with Arcane Season 2. It's been about 2 months since the release of the show. You've most likely seen it and the reviews raving about how amazing and incredible this final season is. But here's the problem. If you stop at watching the show, reading a couple of posts online, and watching a review or two, you'll never understand what actually happened behind the screen, and it's genuinely one of the most tragic tales of modern media. If you stick around until the end of the video, you'll be able to see Arcane for what it truly is, a masterpiece that was never allowed to become what it should have been. Bear with me because we're starting off with a pretty hot take. Except for a few episodes, Season 2 of Arcane is worse than Season 1. Jesus Christ, relax, chill out, dude, it's not that deep, bro. Sure, visually, it's in a league of its own, but the complaints surrounding the show are still completely fair. They either talk about the story or the pacing. For the story, although I will never back down from saying that Season 1 was really repetitive on some points, it at least had the decency to take enough time to explain what the hell was going on. This is something that is surely less of a problem if you are an avid League of Legends player, but it's jarring when you aren't. Oh, Powder is turning mad, she's becoming Jinx. Here's 3 episodes to go over why and how. Now, Caitlyn is becoming morally corrupt. She wants to step on her own values to kill Jinx. Here's 15 minutes, suck it. For the pacing, the show does something very similar also, except that it adds insult to injury by spending extra time elsewhere when it doesn't need to. Case in point, the character of Maddie Nolan. You first meet her in episode 1. She's sweet, she's caring, she's the cute uwu girl cop. She appears in 6 episodes and she's built up as this lover-type character for Caitlyn. This is clearly an important part of their show, right? She is supposed to fill in the void that Vi left in Caitlyn's heart. She's part of her strike team. For God's sake, she's the one that almost executes her at the end of the show. How much time do you think Maddie is on screen for? 15 minutes? She's still an important character. She needs to have at least 20 minutes, especially if you account that the whole runtime of Season 2 is more or less 9 hours, correct? Maddie Nolan gets 5 minutes and 50 seconds of screen time. Most of it is spent somewhere useless. If she's such an important piece, why has she spent like half of her screen time doing something she could have done in 30 seconds? Talk to Vi, tell her you're excited that she's joining up with the cops, and be on your way. Spend the extra 2 minutes in bed with Caitlyn instead. And yet, what is most frustrating is that we know this show can do insane stuff with tiny amounts of time. Jinx and Vi's mom, Felicia, had only 3 minutes and 5 seconds of screen time, and yet she has one of the most memorable moments of the entire show. Why is this the case then? Why are there problems with both the story and the pacing of the show? To understand what happened, we need to break down the structure of Season 2. Nearly every episode kicks off with a montage, a neat trick to fast forward through the events between each episode and let the viewers fill in the gaps. Sounds efficient, right? It sure is, but it's also indicative of whole sequences, hell, full episodes that could have been made from these. There's also plenty of moments where the show is seemingly missing links from one episode to another. Take Jinx's monologue in Silco's old office in episode 4. Everything about it, the framing, the music, suggests a pivotal moment. The last time Jinx was here was when she and Civica teamed up in episode 2, and then in episode 3, they confronted Vi and Caitlyn in the sewers. It seems like she had made her peace in the first act. Silco was dead, and in his place, she found friends in Civica and Isha. Yet in episode 4, the whole plot shifts around the fact that Jinx became a symbol for Zaun, and that Civica wants her to show up, the same way Silco was when he was alive. This is supposed to serve as justification for her return here, and her monologue about how she doesn't want to lose Isha, and therefore doesn't want to be in the spotlight. But it fails to land because the emotional groundwork hasn't been properly laid. Do you remember how many scenes there were between Jinx and Isha? There's like 1 or 2 when they're building an actual relationship. We're expected to buy into a major character shift without seeing how we even got here. It's not just that the montages are skipping over time, it's that they're skipping over the why. The show wants us to feel the weight of her struggle and how she's coming to terms with the fact that taking the place of Silco means he's truly gone for good, but It glosses over super important character development in order to fit the story into the allotted time frame. And you might think I'm nitpicking, but this is all over the show from episode to episode. Vi and Jinx's rushed reconciliation in episode 5, the Piltover Zon alliance crammed into half of episode 8, same issue. If you look for it, you'll see it. With how the story is paced, it's genuinely as if there were entire arcs, if not entire seasons, that had to be cut in order to rush the story along. The montages try to paint over the cracks, but they only make the pacing feel even more fractured. Instead of a rich story with deep characters, we're left with a series of checkbox moments, like someone ticking off a to-do list instead of letting us sit with these characters and their struggles. And with this, you might start to understand what happened to Arcane Season 2. Allegedly, Riot had no issues with Arcane. In fact, they loved it. Multiple interviews and articles point in that direction, that Riot loved how it was panning out, and that they were excited for what was to come. Funny enough, Mark Merrill, Riot's co-founder, addressed this on Reddit. I'm paraphrasing, but he argued Arcane was about building a culture around Riot's world and products, brushing off cynics who claimed Arcane was just a marketing stunt for League. First of all, based. We love direct communication here. But second, it's not about being cynical. It's just a matter of looking at what Riot did historically. People seem to forget that Arcane is just one of the avenues of content they tried to make. Riot also released a slew of games starting the same time as Arcane was first released and stopping just earlier this year. You may see on screen that these games did not do poorly financially. Each and every one of them is actually positive in terms of money. So why did they shut down their studio? Because Riot is a billion-dollar company. Making a few millions here and there isn't as big of a success as people think. Why spend months, maybe even years, developing some games when you could drop a single Cho'Gath skin and make twice the amount? It seems people forget that Riot is a company. Arcane cost a total of $250 million to make in total, the most expensive animated show ever made in the history of animated shows. It goes beyond just the price tag, however. Riot Games is a publicly traded company. They have to make money not only for themselves, but also for their shareholders.
Your only job is to make the numbers work.
Right after the show dropped the first season in November of 2021, they began to have a huge dip in value. Riot needed money, and Arcane had a key role to play in this. By exposing a large audience, most of it new, to the world of League of Legends, they wished to convert this new audience to their game. The only issue with that plan is that it's garbage, when the main talking point of people online about your show is, "Wow, you should watch this, it is nothing like the video game, it's awesome." That's not gonna cut it. And for good reason. League is by no means an approachable experience. Riot has had enough with the games, so it would make sense that they had enough with Arcane also, no matter how big of a success it is. It's all well and good to want to develop a culture around your world. If the people creating it can't eat, it's not going to last for long. Riot had to put their priorities straight, pure and simple. Okay, so why is this any relevant to you, the viewer? Well, it's because it had a massive impact on the people who made Arcane. Studio Fortiche, no matter how talented they are still working for Riot Games. Don't get me wrong, Riot is one of the few studios with enough money to say, fuck it, just do whatever you want. But if you take into consideration the cost of everything going up significantly, they might change their take to, please make us money, please, please. Fortiche is a studio that works slowly, methodically, and precisely. In true French animation style, it's unlike anything you've seen before. That takes time and money, both of which Riot seems more and more concerned about. If Riot puts the pressure on Fortiche, of course it's going to come out wonky. Does that mean it's necessarily bad? Not really. It'd be unfair to go as far as to say that Arcane Season 2 is a bad season of television, but you can see that it clearly has cut corners which needed to be there. This explains almost everything wrong with Season 2. The montages are the best compromise possible between their strength of excellent visual presentation and their increasing constraints. The pacing being off with the characters, the missing links, the voice acting being off. Yes, it might sound like a nitpick, but holy shit, did some lines just not hit. Except for you, Ella Purnell. You can stay. It explains why the whole hyped up storyline between Singed and Warwick in Season 1 is progressed in the end of credits scenes. It explains why there are missing parts of the plot. It even explains why we'll probably never get answers to, like, why does Oriana now live after Robocop Jesus Victor gets obliterated? Because they didn't have the time nor the money. They say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and Arcane just doesn't provide it. Not because it wants to, but because it's forced to. When you have Piltover and Zaun teaming up like Avengers Endgame, that's a pretty insane development. Going over it in half an episode isn't enough. The same way it's forced to wrap up the Warwick and Singed storyline, the same way it's forced to rush along the interaction between Victor and Warwick, the same way it rushes the reunion of Vi and Jinx. And with this in mind, the first statement in the video makes a lot more sense. You may remember what we said earlier. Arcane is genuinely one of the most tragic tales in modern media. It's already fairly upsetting to know that Riot put the pressure on Fortiche, but what it led to is even worse. Never mind the quality of Season 2 or the constraints on the story, Arcane could have legitimized Western animation beyond quote-unquote cartoons, but it didn't. And that's not even the worst of it. Beyond the impact it could have had on the medium, it could have had an impact on greater culture itself. The steampunk aesthetic is more or less dead nowadays. There's still small communities that keep it alive, but nothing as dominant as it used to be in the 2000s. Arcane uses that aesthetic a lot. It takes heavy inspiration from it to tell its story. Can you imagine a world where steampunk sees a resurgence because of the popularity of Arcane? That's a crazy level of impact on culture, which is seemingly what Riot wants to do, but by putting the money over the art in the short term, they failed to deliver on their goal. This is something they totally could have done. Again, we've seen what Fortiche can do if you let them cook. Episode 7 of Season 2 is arguably the greatest single episode of Western animated TV ever made. But even if the show was full of episode 7s, it wouldn't be enough. And this is what it means to say that Arcane is a tragic story. Even if Fortiche had all the money in the world, what they needed more than anything was time. Since Riot cut the grass right under their feet, Fortiche had no time, and as a result, the animators got robbed of telling one of the greatest stories that could have been put to screen. It is genuinely one of the best case studies in how business interests can stifle artistic brilliance. It could have been to Western animation what Akira was to Eastern animation, a piece of content so popular and well executed that it resonated through the ages, and yet Riot failed to see the potential in their own home and decided to chase a couple dollar bills right into traffic. And for that reason, Arcane Season 2 gets a solid 6.5 out of 10. It's not bad, but it's a considerable downgrade from the first season, and the fact that Riot decided to muzzle Fortiche by forcing them to cram their entire story in a single season should be downright criminal. Nonetheless, Fortiche did a good job with what they had, and hopefully they will be able to tell their next story in full. Now that you know that Arcane Season 2, while brilliant in some regards, was rushed by Riot's short-term business outlook, you might be wondering if there are any other shows where the creator was put in an uncomfortable situation. In this video on the new hit anime Dandadan, we also explore something similar, so feel free to check that out. And as always, thank you for watching.